The continuous progress and development of e-commerce, of technology offers progress and development in the field of e-commerce. Assimilating technology could completely transform the way your online business works. Let's now hear on integrating technology with your business model. It's a panel discussion and it is led by Mr. Harminder Sahni. Harminder Sahni is the founder and managing director of Wazir Advisors, a consulting firm focused on consumer products and services sector, offering a comprehensive range of services to its clients to create, compete, and grow their consumer-centric businesses in the Indian market. Harminder also has invested in a few startups as an angel investor. Joining him in the panel are Raveen Sastry, Arpita Majumdar, and Ajay Chandra. Raveen Sastry is the co-founder and head of product at babyoa.com. Raveen has enormous experience in technology, retail, and e-commerce. Raveen has also had over 10 years of experience in various startups in India and the US. Arpita Majumdar is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Kazunga.com. Prior to co-founding Kazunga, she was a senior management consultant with A.T. Kearney and Alex Partners, where her work contributed to significant improvements to the bottom lines of several Fortune 500 companies across different industries and across different geographies. Ajay Chandra is the CTO and co-founder of Infibeam. He heads technology for Infibeam, which also includes their new initiative, buildabazaar.com. Thank you. Over to our session.
Good morning, friends. See, the topic is integrating your technology with your business, and I come from the business side and I understand technology to the extent of how it is used in the business, not being the technology person at all. And but at the same time, this integrating technology into your business, I feel I'm talking, or the panel is talking here to the converts, because most of you come from the technology background and you have created businesses around technology. And I'm happy that on the panel I have people who have better understanding of technology, or maybe at par with the audience, and they'll be able to throw a lot of insights from their personal experience, the companies they have worked with, and whether it's their own companies or whether as consultant or service providers to their client companies. I think their immense experience certainly will bring a lot of value to the panel discussion which we are going to have, and some of the Q&A if we get time at the end of it. And few things which I wanted to say. First is how we will go through the panel. I'll do the introduction bit, 2-3 minutes, and then each of the panelists, they have their viewpoint on the subject which we are discussing here. They'll give around 5-7 minutes of their viewpoint on that. And then I'll moderate discussion for another 10-15 minutes, and we'll try to keep around 5-10 minutes for the Q&A at the end of it. If you have any questions at that point of time, I hope you will have some. See, when we talk about the technology, I think as an engineer, I'm not even a BE, I'm a Bachelor of Technology in a very specialized field of textiles. In the times when I did my engineering, there was no choices you had unless until you were a genius that you set your eyes on doing electronics and you finally got it. So most of us, we set our eyes on electronics and got whatever we managed to get. So I saw the power of technology at the time when I was just 16, and not even 16 when I entered engineering. And I was amazed, because till that time becoming an engineer didn't actually mean that I thought that I love technology and I love machines, and there's just one thing which, if you don't want to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer. That's how it was. And I saw the power of technology, that how it could convert a simple flower, a cotton flower, into an excellent clothing garment, which obviously I was wearing for the last many years, even as a young boy. I was amazed that what technology can do, and simple mechanical engineering products. But one thing which I discovered because of my curious nature, that where does this all came from, textile revolution, all that, what happened there. And one of the most wonderful things which I learned about textile technology was that close to around 150 years ago, somebody wanted to do very complex design on the loom, and he came with a system called Jacquard, system of producing designs. And it's actually a card-based system, the punch card-based system. And many of you may know or may not know about this, that punch card system was the one which became the basis for the whole information technology revolution, computerization, everything which we are seeing here. The first computer was, by Mr. Babbage, was inspired by the Jacquard machine, which was in use for almost 50 years at that point of time. So the whole technological revolution which we talk about, it all started with the industrial revolution and mainly from the textile. So I can take some bit of credit only till that point of time that I'm part of the technology world, not beyond that. After that, of course, it took over and we are all beneficiary of that. Talking about integrating with the business, one of the things which I clearly see is that we can use technology to just do business, make transactions, right? So we pick up phone, talk to people, take an order, supply the order, print a bill. We are using technology, we are doing that. We are just doing business in that. Second level could be where you can start managing the business. Managing the business is not only buying and selling, is to manage the stock, manage your finances, manage your overheads and all kinds of stuff. Third level comes in where you actually start making your business perform better. Productivity, efficiency, profitability, that's what you start doing it. Having gone through the process and all kinds of technologies and the packages, solutions which are available, we talk about all this basic stuff. We are reaching a point where now it's not that what you can do with technology. It's about your attitude towards technology as a company, as a business, that what really do you want to get out of it. Everything is available out there, and everything is available at very, very different and very attractive price points. I remember getting JDA into Shoppers Stop back in 98, 99, and they ended up spending few crores at that point of time, which was like a serious percentage of their turnover, double-digit percentage of their turnover, which they put into putting a JDA system, which finally, today Shoppers Stop is what it is because of that system. At that point of time, they had this attitude, Mr. Nagesh, that we must get technology into the system right now, because as a retail company which has a long-term plan and we are going to be business forever, technology is important for us. Versus today, even today, where people are wanting to do business, just do the business, not trying to see what is available, how can they set the foundation structure for a much better business. They are ignoring it. So it's a matter of choice today, that whether you want to or whether you don't want to. Earlier it was not a choice because nothing was available or was too expensive. So even if I had the attitude that I want to set up a retail business, I would like to have JDA, it required few double-digit crores, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to do it. But today I think could be wrong on numbers, but the Oracles and the SAPs of the world, you can talk to them even if you have a single digit or even less than a crore budget, and they will have some solution for you to do business. So it's a clear-cut choice which one has to make, and after that leave it to the experts, leave it to the best of the breed solutions which are out there available, and the whole ecosystem has evolved so much. In this whole environment, and talking to the converts who build their business around technology, I still think integrating technology with your business is a very, very, very relevant topic, because people continue to either ignore it or make mistakes or compromise or take wrong calls. And I think these are some of the things which my co-panelists, they are going to talk about. And now I move on to that, and one by one they will come and speak to you. Thank you.
Mature. So there are various stages where sins are committed. So I think I'll first start with sin number 1, which is that of technical debt. It's very, very tempting for a company which is doing well, especially, to start accruing this particular kind of debt. You won't realize it till it actually kills you, but if you don't realize it, I can guarantee that it will definitely kill you. So what is technical debt? Well, everyone knows the other kind of debt, which is like you go to a bank, you apply for a loan, you get a giant sum of money. The bankers show up every single month saying, hey, you owe me this much, hey, you owe me this much. And you strive really hard, settle that debt out, and finally you're like clear, it's gone after you settle it. There's the second debt that happens in software. It happens because you don't keep your room clean. That's why it happens. If you have a nice house, right, and you keep everything in place, things look good. It's easy to, find whatever stuff you want in your house. Now, this is a parallel I can draw with software. If you keep your room clean when you're beginning out with, building your product, right? Now it's easy to add stuff, grow the product, evolve the product, because business needs are always going to be very, very, very pressurizing on the product. And if the core product that you build cannot take the onslaught of business needs, it's going to crumble. It's just going to collapse under its own pressure because you didn't keep it neat. It's really weird. Nobody in the business world really gets it when I say neat, because they're like, what are you talking about? I mean, what does neatness got to do with debt? What's the cost? Where's the cost? Very simple. Dirty software needs more people to manage. It just sucks in, it's like a black hole that keeps sucking in more people, because now there's a giant core that is building and nobody wants to touch it because it's dirty. Nobody likes to do the cleanup job. If you ask a developer, hey, can you go and clean up this piece of code, whereas build something new and shiny, exciting, they will always go for the new, shiny, exciting, because it's always more fun to build new stuff. But it's like really boring to go clean up your room. But over time, if you don't clean up your room, it's going to just become so dirty that nobody will want to touch that room, like ever. So what do? You put plasters around it, you make it look good, you put on giant bedsheet and cover it, but actually there's like enormous amount of dirt underneath. And you keep doing this layers over layers of dirt gets piled on. And now it's so expensive to maintain this pile of dirt that it really kills you. For example, let me give an anecdote. So we started off our life as a automobile, and if we hadn't corrected our path back in the day when we started off, I think we would have just gone off into obscurity long time back, because there was a time in the company where we suffered very heavily because we had to do X and Y, and we had to do both X and Y very well. We had to be a very good car generation lead engine, automobile lead engine, and very good at selling. And that's almost impossible, especially in your early stages when you have a limited bandwidth of everything. You have limited marketing, limited developers, limited service people, everything is limited. So at that stage, it's not worth doing two different things where you start accruing this kind of debt. It's going to really kill you really soon. So it was good that we realized we let go of this old monster that we built and said, no, hey, let's reboot ourselves and do the one thing which we're going to do, which is selling really well. So that's one big thing that we actually learned, and we actually changed our course. This leads to a very connected topic, which is second sin, not hiring the correct people. Now there are like various aspects to hiring. Hiring is a very, very, very giant topic. I don't think I can cover all the aspects of hiring correctly in 2 minutes, but all I can say is different problems need different skill sets. It might be very tempting to think that problem A and problem B are very similar, so let me hire for problem A and then put him on to problem B, because it is finally software code, people will learn, jump from ship A to ship B and do well. Yeah, there are few people who can do that well, but in reality it's really, really hard to pull that off in a very clean way. And this leads to technical debt again, because a wrong guy doing the wrong job will eventually do it the wrong way, and end of 6 months you'll see that you paid 10 lakhs to this super awesome developer you thought was going to revolutionize the way you do your technology. He built the wrong stuff because he didn't know what he was doing. And why? Because you hired him for job A and you put him on job B. And while he was doing his work, he was doing his work well, but doesn't mean he was building the right thing. And end of the day, he built something that probably worked for you, but you could have done the same thing at 1/10 the cost with 1/10 or with 2 times the productivity. Really, that's the kind of difference I'm talking about. And this slowly poisons your balance sheet. You won't realize it, it will never show up in your balance sheet. But it will show up in a very indirect way. Day one, you have, say, a couple of developers. Year one, you have 20, 30 developers. Year three, if you're doing really well, you have, say, close to 100 developers. And this is because you probably don't need so many people to do exactly what you're doing. You accrued all this cost because your core was bad and you didn't keep it clean. And if you don't realize it upfront, this is the kind of 100 developers is a lot of cost for an e-tail company today. Many companies have to probably sell like $1 billion worth of stuff to even cover such costs. 100, 200 developers, good quality developers I'm talking about, can mean so much to the bottom line of a e-tail company, especially where the margins are like really low and you have such huge marketing spends. On top of all this, if this is going to sink your costs, it's going to be very hard for a company to recover a technical debt. So that's pretty much all I thought I'll cover in these 3-4 minutes, and if there's anything else, I think
Thanks, Ajay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ajay. So that was Ajay Chandra for InfoView. So can I ask Arpita now to please?
Good morning, everyone. This topic is obviously a very vast topic, right? Technology, as even Harminder said, is the basis of everything that we do. It's the foundation, it's the walls that house us, it's the foundation on which we are built. It's pretty much everything that we do. And from that standpoint, I guess when I was thinking about the topic and thinking about integration, I think there are many different elements of integration, right? Integration, whether you build yourself and integrate, or whether you buy from outside and you integrate, and how do you go about the process, and how do you even decide what is right and what is wrong? And I don't, business to business, I'm sure some people will say, this is the right answer or that is the right answer, but even when I, to give specific examples on this sort of make versus buy or build versus buy, is when we look at the keynote, speech that was given by Shankarshan Banerjee, right? He talked about 4 different things, and the second and the third one were of particular interest to me in the sense that the second one was about curated experiences, and the third he talked about was the omni-channel communication with the customers. And both of these can have many different aspects of integrating the technology in terms of if you wanted to do it right? So when we talk about curated experiences, I think one of the examples he had on his presentation was about a grocery chain personalizing the pricing to the customer because of, depending on the habits or on the loyalty programs that they were running. That's absolutely amazing, right? But in terms of how do you make that happen? So if I decide that I want to integrate technology in order to do that in my business, how do I go about it? Do I look at a software that's outside that can mine it for me? Do I look at building a loyalty program? Do I look at, maybe a mix of both? So how I go about it is sort of, in my mind, is something that really depends on what you think is core. So if you think that, no, my data, the way I mine it, and the way I go about it, the way I collect it, is something that I want to keep completely to myself. I don't want it to be on any cloud. I don't want it to be on anything that can access it or get access to it. I would rather than build it instead of buying it. Now, similarly, on the omni-channel piece of it, there again it's very different. I mean, I would in fact argue that it's very difficult for, not difficult per se, but perhaps not as time efficient to go ahead and build an in-house CRM system that will do that, because there are several tools that are out there that can actually achieve the same thing. However, the key thing is, if I had to do an omni-channel communication, it's not only about the fact that can I get the, my customer from a Twitter to move on to a phone, to then move on to email, and then on to Facebook, and communicate continuously. But it's also about, it's not just about how I communicate, it's also about what I communicate. So, and the what is, from a technology standpoint is, am I answering a problem that the customer has? Or am I, basically giving the customer certain information? Or am I just helping the customer track their product or their order in the system? So if I have to do that, then my integration piece involves not only the external CRM software that might be sitting in my, on several computers, on hundreds of, customer service computers and phones or whatever, but also how that is then in turn integrating with my in-house, perhaps, and this is where I feel it should be in-house, is my in-house ordering system, right? And my entire tracking system, which is tracking my product from the order till, the end delivery. So in terms of sort of make versus buy, sort of my personal thinking is that anything that is core to my business, I make and develop in-house. And back to the point that Ajay made, very, very important to ensure that you're doing it the right way, you're not over-speccing it and building a palace when you actually really need a small house, or that you are speccing it in such a way that you're building a small house, but you can add the rooms to make it a palace when you get there. So solving for scale, not too early, but somewhere along the way, so that you're not then having to scratch out what you've done and start from fresh, which obviously is a time-consuming and expensive process. And therefore, of course, hiring the right people and all of that. But then if it's a technology that I know is important to me, like the whole customer service angle, right? Exceedingly important. We all know, and in fact, Shankar's Banerjee's keynote speech pretty much focused on the fact that it's really all about the customer at the end of the day. So those aspects of the technology perhaps is something that I don't want to spend time building. I will get it, I will assess all the different things that are out there, I will get it, and then I will integrate it though with whatever I have in-house so that it becomes a seamless process. So that's sort of, those are my thoughts in terms of, the make versus buy and the integration aspects of technology, because otherwise, as we know, it's a very, very vast topic. There are multiple different aspects of it. Harbinder also mentioned in his opening remarks that, is it just selling? Is it managing? Is it doing, improving the selling and the managing? So there are different sort of elements of it, and something that I think we can sit here discussing for a long time. But how we integrate and what we make and what we buy, but how do we seamlessly mesh the two, is I think what sort of makes the difference between, being able to really be successful afterwards or not.
Thanks, Abda. Thanks. Rubin?
Good morning all. So Harminder actually, he actually touched upon an important point, which is essentially the attitude of, towards technology. So, one of the things I thought, we can probably discuss, and, I'm sure there'll be some people who agree and some people who don't. But I think, over the last, 10 years of my experience, being in product and, being the co-founder at Myntra, Hoopos, and now Babyol, there are few things that I've realized, right, that are, myths that kind of go around, right? So the first thing that I've learned, right, or I've seen is, lean startup or agile and, some of these jargon, right? So everybody seems to, want to follow that methodology of building technology. I think what people are not seeing, and we didn't, for the longest time, is essentially what does it take to get there? Because they're just fraught with, it's just so much danger if you go down the path, right? So one of the big dangers there is your team is just not ready. If you don't have a great team like Ajay is talking about, right? You have this rock star engineer sitting around. Now you're going through this whole process of this lean methodology, and you could just come up with very, very crappy software, right? And the other thing is, I've seen at least, at two of my previous companies, where this becomes a reason for not having a process, not planning. And that pretty much actually kills the whole technology, your whole roadmap. Because once people start using it as a reason, then you're actually pretty much, out there, right? The other myth is that, the whole thing about, MVP, right? So your minimum viable product. People interpret this in just so many ways, right? And so in one of my previous companies, when I was working in the US, we came up with this product, and which had I think 15 features when it went live, right? And for us, that was our MVP. We pulled out there and we said, hey, you know what? There will be these early adopters, evangelists, who are going to kind of use it and tell us how good the product is and or what features they use, right? quickly realized that they're pretty much not using anything. You know, they just, a lot of people just hated the product, right? They're going like, what is this? So when I look back at it, you know, the key thing there was, yes, you know, you need an MVP, but the key thing is to narrow the scope. It's not about building 50, 10, 12 features and putting it out there and assuming, you know, your your evangelists or your early adopters are going to use it, because you know what, the early adopters have a life, you know, they're just not there. They have their job, they have a job to protect, they have a life, they're just not there to test your product, right? And that was actually for me a huge learning, right? And you know, over the last couple of companies, try to really narrow the scope down, right? I mean, for example, when we were launching Hoopos, right? So there's a whole thing about, you know, should we build the back end because it's so critical, should we do this? You know, we ended up saying, hey, you know, first thing is, we don't even know how it's going to work. There are two competitors out there. There was the Babyo, there was First Cry. We're saying, you know, so let's get the whole front end out there. And what we ended up doing is actually pick up an open source package for the back end, right? And say, let's use it as is. It doesn't matter, right? You know, we know we can, you know, build the whole back end later. So we said, okay, let's build the front end. Now in the front end, what do you really concentrate on, right? Do you really concentrate on your search feature? Do you concentrate on how you do your photography? Do you concentrate on your how people navigate? Do you look at the checkout? And we had to really, really kind of narrow it down. Eventually, so it comes up with a product that at least some people find really, really, really useful, right? And I think this MVP is true not only with building when you're starting a company, but also when you think about parts of features that you're building, you know, within an existing product. So these are kind of two big, you know, lessons in integrating technology.
Thanks, Amin. Just continuing with that, Amin, I'll come to you first. And so in a way, what you are saying is that it's always, so we are talking technology and we are talking business, while it's all about the consumer. You keep the consumer at the center and then you see what technology works for the consumer and business will happen. So given that, again, I think that's the reason why people go for these kind of MVPs, which you obviously don't like, that minimum viable product, because that's how they start thinking, right? And when I talk to some of the people coming from a technology background, and I'm sure Ajay has a point on that, that's what they feel, that the business people somehow pay too much attention to the transactions, too much to buying, selling, what's happening, that business should start, and they end up compromising on what really is the business infrastructure. So what do you think about that? These are two contradictions.
So they're not. So I'm not against MVP. I think I'm against the way I have, or you know, few of us have personally done MVPs in the past. The problem is, you know, you have to start narrowing down what you want to go out with and go deep enough so it's useful for somebody. The assumption that you're going to have, you know, 15 features and then you're going to go throw it out there and wait for the customer to tell you what he's going to use. I don't think that's going to happen. Because the customer he actually can't use any of those features because they're built so badly.
Right. So what we are saying is that in terms of when we are saying MVP, it's not about doing a shallow product. Focus on very limited part where it really makes sense, where it really makes business sense as well as for the consumer. And that's where you go very, very deep. There you are not going to go MVP. There you are going really, really deep into that.
Absolutely.
I think that's now understand that and it makes a lot of sense. Ajay, you had something to add?
I just want to add to that. Just a small anecdote. So when we started Build a Bazaar, we started that like year and a half back. I wouldn't use the term MVP, but we actually put out, in relative terms, what we put out was a very, very, very thin, slim version of what we have today. It just did 5 to 10 things, but it did those 5 to 10 things very well. At least the customer could come, he could set up a site, he could decorate a site, he could add items, billing was fine. So at least the basics were in place. We had, I won't say very deep buckets for each of the verticals that are needed for e-commerce, but we did have enough buckets so that, and with just enough so that the customer was never had the feeling that, no, what the hell did I just buy? I mean, what is this all about? So when you do MVP, it's okay to do MVP as long as you have something meaningful that you put out to the customer, not something shallow with half-baked features or features that just don't work very well with each other. And then other big important thing is, you always evolve the software, not design. When I say that, what I really mean is, design means you're always going to only add to software. Evolve means, even bad things die. So if things don't work out well, be sure that you are quick to go and cull it out of the core, and keep your core meaningful and small and swift all the time. So because that again goes back to my first point of technical debt. That's probably number one cause that business always say business never comes back and says let's cut this out. I never heard any business come and say hey, this is not working well, let's cut this out. So I think businesses should realize that maintaining legacy is a bigger cost than actually adding stuff and going forward all the time. At some point you have to shed the weight so that you can run faster. So it's slightly, I went off topic, but I just thought I'll cover that.
So, but in terms of, on the same point, when we talk about the integration part of it, and so a lot of people take it like this, integration actually means that whatever is the best available, we put it all together, connect the dots, and start making a meaningful picture out for the business. And I think that's where what is right, what is wrong, that's where and what is now useless, which was quite useful till some time, which is now useless, which comes into play. But my belief is, for the audience also is sitting in the room, all of you e-tailing background and e-commerce, with the pace of business, the way it's moving, it's beyond anybody's control, it seems. Do people really get time? You are in the technology company, you are in a company which is doing it for others. Do people really get time to sit down and think about these things that were?
No.
Yeah, so that's where my worry coming from.
Sad truth, no.
Yeah, because I have been involved with a couple of e-commerce companies as an investor as well as an advisor, and I've seen this. That's always the next new big thing. Nobody is looking back at what we have done so far. And competition sometimes, I've seen the market, and people are very proud of it, and I'm not meaning any offense here, but people are very proud of it that they are watching their competition not only in India but globally all the time. But sometimes I believe that's where they stop looking at themselves. They're always continuing to chase somebody else, chase somebody's ambition, chase somebody's dream, chase somebody's mistakes many times. That's what's happening. And that's what my observation is. Arpita, would you like to, please?
Sure. It is obviously very difficult. As Ajay said, his short answer was no. And what happens obviously is the world we are in, and especially in the e-commerce sector, things are moving very rapidly, and competition, there's plenty of competition going around. So the tendency to say, okay, let's just go on to the next thing because somebody else is doing it it's quite natural. And it is very difficult to take a step back and to say, okay, I have built, let's say 5 years ago I had A, B, and C, and they're doing certain things. Does A still work, and does B still give me the efficient the return that I need, or is it really solving my purpose, or do we need to get rid of B altogether? And then part of it is also, there are two things actually. One is, sometimes we have this whole thing of classically known as the not invented here syndrome. So we think, oh, wait a minute, we didn't do it, so we don't care about it, or we need to do it because then it's ours. Well, but does it really make sense to do it? Maybe it makes sense to build something that helps with my, warehousing and figuring out what I have where at any given point in time and tracking that. Maybe that makes sense, or does it? And I think we are all guilty of the fact that we don't think enough about that. And we certainly do not go back and be critical on our tools and systems to say, this was good, not so good, this can be much better because it was built modularly to begin with, and that we should just ask.
See, one of the points, Arpita, which you made on people part while we were discussing and you didn't get a chance to say, this whole talent thing which we talk about, the gap and the way things are moving, the pace, you need more of it, but you are getting less of it. And you are getting, obviously, the huge competition for the talent must be really huge in your businesses. So how does one, in this environment, is it necessarily all about, let's say, doing it all by ourselves because the talent is so short, or integration should be taken to the level where you're actually an integrator of good things which other people are doing, and you put it all together and create a business out of it? What would you say about that? And I'm coming from the exactly same point where I really want to do it all myself. I don't want to look at anybody else's stuff, but can I do it because there are not many people out there who I can hire and keep?
Yeah, part of it is talent, for sure. Part of it is also core competency, right? So I think this was a point whether you're looking at that MVP scenario or you're looking at, sort of just bringing on and growing. Suddenly you realize to like a 100% team. It's more about saying, okay, I only have 24 hours in a day, of which I have to sleep, let's say, a few hours. So I have so many working hours, and I have so many people, and I have to also be able to finish so many things by a certain timeline, because either competition is running away with it, or maybe the opportunity is going away. Forget competition, but it just won't exist tomorrow. So from that standpoint, then deciding what I built in-house versus what I get from outside. And I think it is to me, I think it's, I would love to hear the experiences of the other panelists. To me, I think it's always a slightly difficult decision. It is easier if there are certain things, like as I said, there's a CRM tool, and those of us in e-tailing will probably not build our own CRM software, right? Because you have so many that are already there, well established, have been working in retail and brick and mortar businesses for a long time, and they have tweaked well along the way, and now they have modified themselves to be very universal, very connected, etc. So there it's a very easy choice. But for certain others, the choice always is, okay, if I do it, so data mining, do I want to do my own data mining, or do I bring in a data mining expert? What then happens? Confidentiality, information, usage, who all has access to this information? Those become the business reasons to determine whether I build my own and then integrate it on, or I take it from the outside and plug it in, and then figure out a connection point. I mean, Ravin, what would you say?
Yeah, Ravin.
So actually, most of the companies that we've done, I think one of the things that has really worked for us is using open source. I mean, I find open source software personally, and I'm sure the audience has an opinion, but just a lot better than anything else, because you're actually not making a build versus buy decision. Like a lot of you just take your open source and you customize it to your needs, and we do that. I think, you talk about analytics, right? There's Hadoop, there's a lot of Apache products. We do that all the time. Similarly for the way we started before, we built on OpenTap, which is a complete open source kind of software, and then we customize it like there's no tomorrow. So I think a build versus buy, sometimes there is an in-between path, luckily, right, with open source.
Mm-hmm. Right. Ajay?
That's an interesting thought, but actually the word integrate, right, that brought back memories from my school days. So my maths professor, he said, no, integration is always harder than differentiation. I think I was like bang on there. So the thing is, the biggest pain with integration is sometimes when you do take in these foreign bodies that you want to integrate, some are very nice to work with. They are inherently they are integrable. Some are like just hostile. You don't want to even touch it with a 10-foot pole. But they're very key. I mean, if you have to go back, even with or without open source, if you have to build certain things, like say a payment gateway, very hard. Suppose you had to build a CDN, very hard. There are like infrastructure pieces that you just got to integrate with. Logistics, very hard. You can't build your own logistics. You can't build your own payment gateway. You can't build your own CDN. Those are stuff that you just have to integrate. So there's where the hard choice is. So which is the better one to integrate with, right? Now there you really have to tap into your experience. Actually, most of it is common sense, and see that is A better, B better, C better. It's not always the cost there, not the current cost. I'm sure the cheaper one you'll have the greatest temptation to go with the cheaper one because it's solving your current burning need. But there's a giant rider clause saying it's a slow poison, right? You can go the cheaper one today, but you're going to get hit either 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. And when you get hit so bad, you can't recover. So that's a really big hidden danger that I think it's very hard for anybody to just take a look at it from outside and say, this is good, this is bad. All the devil is in the details, and you really have to pay attention to those details early on because that's going to save your day later. That's my take on it.
Thanks, that's very well said. We have time for a couple of questions if we can take now, if anyone of you have one. So please introduce yourself and just let us, who are you, addressing this question too.
Good morning, all of you. I'm Rituraj. I head digital for Godrej Nature's Basket, digital and e-commerce both. With all the discussion going on, the main issue that which our business is also facing is, to an extent, that how to integrate different technologies on different platforms. In the keynote, we understood that you need to have right customer information. So when your staff is actually speaking to the customer, knows that okay, whether this person is active on Facebook or Twitter, what kind of products he has bought in the past, what kind of liking that person has. So that actually gives you insight in the mind of the customer, and then you will be able to probe him better, or lead him better to take the right kind of decision or purchase decision. But when you have a CRM platform which is on a different technology, you have social media platforms like Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, which are themselves are different technologies. You have in-house order management system and in-house inventory system, tracking system. You have an IT team which is which just speaks in technical language that so much server space, this needs to be done. This is the RxL. This integration needs to be done. So yeah, Ajay, coming from the point of view, I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, with all of this happening, and there is a dissonance. Okay, when in the company, people do not understand that all of this needs to get integrated in a customer-friendly manner. You can't have 5 different islands where and expect that there will be bridges that will be built within those islands automatically. But yes, there are very less companies outside who can actually help you build those bridges. Apart from that, you have problems of funds, okay, which actually bog you down, and you're not able to do which you want to do. Maybe you do it in a different way, but at the end of it, you fail to achieve what you want to achieve at the end of the year, maybe.
So Rituraj, what's your question?
So the question is that how can we do it more cost effectively? That's what my question is.
If you want the smaller answer, there is no cost-effective way to do it. Okay, what you're really asking is this, right? If I had to convert your question to a different thing. So you're saying I have a room full of people, and each person in the room speaks a different language. I have a Chinese, I have a Japanese, I have a Vietnamese, I have a Gujarati, I have a Tamilian, I have a Telugu guy, and you want all of them to talk to a customer who's speaking English. So that's what you really are trying to accomplish there. And for every single guy, you have to have a translator who can translate that into English. And you know how bad the translations can get sometimes, like Chinese to English and English back to Chinese. It's going to be a hell of a, it's going to be chaotic. So the way you can reduce the cost, instead of having a Chinese Jap and a Telugu guy, at least have 3 Chinese guys. Okay, that's going to help you. Not that it's going to eliminate the cost. You can at least use 1 translator for 3 guys, right? So now that's how you can potentially optimize on your cost. And that's where the temptation to do everything in-house is, because now everybody's at least talking the same language. But you can't, that's the truth. You don't have the bandwidth to do everything in-house. So you have to weigh that. I mean, can you afford 5 different languages or 1 language? So it's a very, very, very subjective decision one has to take. It is time bound, it is finance bound, it is geography bound sometimes. So too many factors to even answer that question. The short answer is, yeah, it's not possible to do it cost effectively, completely. But is it possible to optimize? Yes.
I've just been informed that we are short on time, so that was the first and the last question. So I'm sure you can catch us all over the tea or coffee. Sorry for that, I don't have control on this. Thank you very much, and thank you, Arpita, Ajay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Harminder, Raveen, Arpita, and Ajay. That was invaluable. I really hope you all get a chance to ask your questions during the networking and the lunch breaks.